All right. Hi, guys. I'm Jamie. I'm back. For those who were at our larger launch last month, I had the honor to interview and discuss stories from the Muses with a larger group. And I was so excited when Maria asked me to do the same for our more intimate gatherings that we're doing now. So thank you so much for joining. Just a couple shout outs. Hopefully you have purchased the book already. And so if you have, we would love for you to share your feedback on Amazon. So just a quick shout out there if you would be willing to talk about all the wonderful things you experienced while you read these delicious bits. I know the authors and IW Press would appreciate it. So we're going to kick it off and have opportunities. I have some questions to ask each of the authors and give them a little time to talk about their own process and their involvement in this book. And then if you all have questions, pop them in the chat. And at the end, we will have time for Q&A for the larger group. And I'm so excited that we have a really intimate group because hopefully you guys will have some really interesting questions at the end. So I was going to kick it off with Lucy. Surprise. And so I was telling the authors before everyone joined that I was a bit of a stalker the past couple of days and have been trolling everyone's socials and websites to kind of maybe, get some inspiring bits to ask. And so on your website, Lucy, no pressure on quoting your website, you talk about creation pouring out of you once you've connected to your true self, which I just thought was the most beautiful way of describing your relationship with your art. And you're also an artist in many realms, children's author, physical artist. And I wanted to hear more about that creation pouring out of you with regards to you writing from the Muses, and maybe how it might be different from your physical art as well.
Okay, thank you. That's a great question. No pressure felt at all.
Well, you put it on your website, so it was fair game.
It must be true then. Thank you. It's lovely to be here. Okay, so I guess where I can start with that is, it looks to me like we're on a journey in life, and part of that journey, or most of that journey in my experience, is exploring who we are on a deeper level, at a core level, our spiritual level, if you like. And for me, the more that I explore that, and the closer that I get to who I truly am and who my truth is, the easier it seems and the more effortless it seems, I guess, to play in this human world and express as me in various different ways. And I found that the more I do that, and the more I do that in a playful way, the better I come across, and the more vulnerable I come across, and the more vulnerable I am, the more it connects to other people, the more people feel the truth of where I'm going and what I'm saying, and it allows others to be themselves and feel safe in this game of life, which is kind of the way I see it most of the time. It's not always the best game, but I can't even remember what the question was.
No, I love that, because I feel like it's like two things. It's like you're connecting to your true self, which gives back to others, but also makes being playful more playful. Like you're really having the true experience when you do that for yourself. And then also you're mirroring that back to others as well.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like this loop.
Yeah, and it is. And I'm not sure I have the words always to express how much more lighthearted that I see life, but I guess that hopefully kind of comes across in my words, in my writing, in my art, I like to kind of think I walk my talk, hopefully, in life. And I always remember this. And we were running a retreat last week, and we were actually talking about show, don't tell. My auntie stole it, and I think she stole it from me because I talked about it so much in our writing. And I just think that's it in life. And I think we can so easily think we're not good enough, we don't do enough, people don't understand us enough, we don't express well enough. And that was the difference for me when I realized my starting point is I am enough, and I do express enough, and people do get me, and that opens up like a whole new world and a whole new way of being for me. And as I was just saying, when I experience that and I'm feeling that, then I know that others are, so it's better for them, and that just impacts everyone and the whole bloody world basically, which cannot help but have a ripple effect for the good. And then there's more joy and more beauty and more experience, more capacity for experience. Yeah.
Oh, it's funny because even as you're saying that, I was like, me too,
Yeah.
me too. So
Yeah.
your generosity in sharing that puts everyone else at ease. Like, we don't have to pretend. We can just be honest.
Yeah, absolutely.
And how specifically has been, because like we talked about, you're very playful on the page as a children's author, you're playful with your artwork. With the stories from the Muses, it's a little bit different. How has working with Muse energies transformed your ability to be so honest on the page in a new way?
I think for me, when I started my writing with Jules a few years ago, it was around about the same time when I quit my drinking, or I quit my heavy drinking. I do have a drink now, but I had a new relationship with drinking, let's say. And from that moment, I like to think I grew up. Maybe not, but I like to think from there, I grew up in a healthy way. Like, when I was drinking, I was hiding. Yes, I might have been playful. Yes, I might have been the fun one at the party, but it was just all bullshit. And now it's like the difference when I write from the Muse energy, it's still coming sort of in a playful way, but a grown-up playful way, like a grounded, I would probably use the word grounded. And that's the difference. So because of that, I'm able to open up all of me, not just those bits I was hiding so much and pretending and being playful in a fake way. And because of, the drink isn't there, I haven't got something that I can hold on to look after me. There's kind of only me. And now that comes out in a more genuine, authentic, grounded, grown up, whatever way you want to call it, way. Does that make any sense? I don't know. But
no, it makes perfect sense. And I love it. I'm kind of envisioning a mask that's taken off. You know what I mean? As if like that was needed at one point in order to entertain and be playful. And it's like, you know what? You just had it all in you from the start.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what I think a great message to all creatives, that we have it all in us. It's just a matter of mining for it and getting it out.
Yes, definitely. We definitely do.
I love that. Thank you, Lucy. Thank you. And remember, if anyone has any chats, ship them over to Ria. Rather, questions in the chat. Vanessa, where are you? There you are.
Yes.
On the beautiful beach of California.
I'm trying to do a different background for each interview. So.
Oh, I like that. I like that. So curious to hear from you, when you look at the Muse book, we talk about the 7 archetypal muses. And the way the book is described and the way the class is described is you have these 8 weeks, or rather 7 weeks, and you have to choose a muse a week. So I'm curious, were some muses more difficult than others? Were you like, I'm going to do the hardest one first? You know, how did you approach it? You got the assignment and now it's the next day. What do you do?
I think unlike many of the students in Jules's class, I worked a lot with Jack Grapes before, and I've worked with Jack for more than 20 years. I know a lot of students have, but I've done muses twice before this. So this isn't my first experience looking at the writing through this lens. And every time it's completely different for me. It always amazes me when Jules says things like, and I don't remember exactly what it was, but my virgin is in my fingertips, or things like that, where people like remember. I don't remember from time to time where the energy was, although I make a note of it as I'm doing it. And I think the other thing that Jules says that I think is very true is that a lot of times the ones that show up for us at the end are the hardest ones. And I don't know that we know consciously which ones the hardest ones will be to access in ourselves. And I kind of, I follow her direction around this, and I let the energy speak to me. Which one is going to come up for me this week? Where am I feeling it? Kind of do a little meditation about which energy I want to go with. And I think that it's interesting that the way that Lucy was talking about it and the way that I see it around looking at these different parts of ourselves, and that it's a way to play at being something else than what you normally are, and finding the way in which that is also you. So I am not physically a mother. I was not able to get pregnant. I went through 7 years of infertility. So I always have some fraught issues around the mother muse. But then what is the energy for me? Where does that energy come from? And where is that energy still in me, even if I'm not physically a mother? And I love the way that they show up for me, and that it's different for me every time I've done it. And looking for where it is in my physical body, where the energy is, what it feels like. Is it tingly? Is it airy? Is it grounded? And also looking for music. How does it play out for me in a musical way? Do I feel a rhythm? Do I hear something that is that energy? And I remember editing, and I had a piece that had a refrain in it based on the music I was hearing. And we had to edit our pieces for this book down from 500 words to 400 words, which doesn't seem like a lot when I say it out loud, but it's you got to cut out things that are important to you. How do you do that? And I remember asking Maria, it's like, do you want the process in there, or do you want the finished piece? Do you want that musical line in there repeated? And she's like, if it doesn't fit the final piece, we want the final piece. We want the end product, not the process product. So I took that all out, and I don't even remember now which piece that was, but it informed how I wrote it. It informed where the energy came from. So I think the hardest ones come at the end, and they come at the end because you don't know what to do with them before that. That's how it was for me anyway.
Did you find that the ones that were hardest to do at the end, did you find your experience with them was enlightening or insightful because they kind of hid? Could you talk a little bit about that? Did they surprise you or challenge you?
I think the beauty of method writing, the beauty of approaching writing as a creative process, as opposed to, I have a story to tell and this is how I'm going to tell my story. Jack always says your story is boring. And so allowing the process to guide you, as opposed to what it is you think you want to say, is always surprising. Because if you really let the genius flow through you, as opposed to saying what you think you have to say or want to say, Jules talks about the difference between what we're doing and blog writing. You think that a lot of people in the class even have blogs and write that kind of, well, this is what I did today and this is what I learned from it. And that can be interesting if that's what you're looking for, but that's not what we're doing here. What we're doing is something more creative that allows us to then access deeper and different aspects and angles of who we are. So when you do it right, when you kind of get to that place of allowing things to happen, you're always surprised because those beautiful lines just come from somewhere. And when you allow them to come from somewhere instead of forcing them out or telling something. I'm working with my students all the time. Lucy said it, the showing, not telling, show, not tell, show, not tell. How do you do that? How do you do that? Don't tell me what happened. Be in that moment and explain the moment from that place. And it's a really good exercise for bringing that connection to the reader. And Lucy talked about this too, telling your truth. And part of what we deal with in the class, and especially with publishing, is the shame. It's like, oh, do I really want people to read this stuff? And it's scary. And that shame, pushing through the shame to the disclosure, to the truth, to the deep honesty of it, always creates a connection with the reader, so that the reader can also then have a little bit of courage to push through their own shame and share what they might not be willing to share. And then we can all grow. We can all be healthier because we're not hiding under the shame.
I love it. It's like kind of, once again, this taking off of the mask.
Yeah.
And I love what you say about, when you were talking about almost ego getting in the way of product.
Yeah.
I kind of envision you kind of like, I'm in a car, the Muse is driving. I'm going to, you know what I mean? Focus on the product. I'm going to let the creativity come through and not worry about editing it in my head.
Yeah, you can always edit later. I love the Annie Lamott line about it's a shitty first draft. It's just shitty first draft. You need to let that stuff just come out. And then the editing is a different kind of process, and you can do that later.
Yeah,
and that's when the better stuff comes. And I'm always reminding my students, my class is structured a little differently, that people write during class and then share what they've written. So everybody's always sharing a shitty first draft. They just wrote it. It's a shitty first draft. And everybody always thinks that what they've written is horrible. And then they read it and everybody else is like, oh my God, you've just described a feeling that I never knew how to put into words. That really helps me to explain and understand myself better by hearing you say that. So I say it's majority rules. If everybody else in the class thinks that what you've written is wonderful, then it's wonderful. You're outvoted on that. And that's a hard thing to get past, that first sort of step of just letting it out and then sharing it. It's all an act of courage. Writing it is an act of courage, sharing it is an act of courage. And once you get through all of that, it's a healing process. It's always healing. It's always a magical moment of sharing and learning and being present with other people.
And not letting ego trump creative genius.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you. Moving on to Al. Hello.
Hey, Jamie.
So I am curious how this experience with you, not only writing from the Muses, but also being part of this publication, has influenced you as a human, as a creative.
Wow, how hasn't it influenced? It's fascinating to see how much of my truth, speaking to what's been said already, really, how much of my truth leaks out onto the page, particularly when times are a little bit rocky, right? Because I can see when I start to write, particularly when it comes from here, you know, there are times when I feel like I have to write, you know, I have to get something down, or it's a busy week and I've got a time limit or whatever, and I start reporting things. And then that writing comes out, which often doesn't tell me very much at all. But often if I'm feeling, you know, a bit sensitive or a bit vulnerable or whatever, and I write from there, then, you know, I'll read things maybe 2 or 3 times before class just to make sure that they make some sort of sense and that I don't, you know, I don't trip over them. But it's only in class, when I read it in class, and suddenly it's like reading it for the first time, because suddenly I'm reading my, when I say feelings, that isn't a good enough word. I'm reading my truth, my heart. And then I see other people who are listening to that, you know, it goes to what Vanessa said just now. I feel people picking it up, and then I pick it up, you know, it's kind of like, it reflects back at me. And I think, oh, okay, that's how I've been feeling this week. If I can just share, you know, because it's so fresh for me at the moment, that my dad passed about 10 days ago. And I've written 3 pieces since that time. And each one of them has been so different, but each one of them has come from the moment in time that I wrote them. Very much about that thing happening, you know, and how I feel about it and how other people seem to be feeling about it, and how we're all kind of getting on with it and all of that. But to read it makes, when I went to the post office just now to shut an account down for him, and I started to cry at the till because suddenly something kind of just whooshed over me. It was a stupid thing, but it just kind of, all of this emotion kind of came out of me at the till, and I could feel these tears coming down. But it was okay, because I knew I felt like that because it came out in my writing 2-3 days ago. So it wasn't a surprise to me that I felt like that. It wasn't a surprise to me that I was going to be very emotional, because I'd already seen it on the page. I mean, how beautiful is that? That you're kind of living your life out there in the world, but you're also living it in this way where you can kind of get a different type of glimpse of it as well. So for me, it's just, it kind of brings life into 4K, if you like. And I'm really feeling that at the moment. If you'd asked me that question maybe 2 weeks ago, I wouldn't have given the same answer. But now I'm really feeling that. You know, I'm writing a lot at the moment, and it's just, I read it back and I think, oh, you feel like that. Isn't that beautiful? You feel like that.
Well, I'm so sorry for your loss, first of all.
Thank you, Jamie.
And you're really showing me the importance of being present at the blank page at the time, you know? What I also really love about what you're saying is there's a difference between writing your work, which is a personal thing, and sharing your work, like giving voice to your work. It's a different, it sounds like it's a very different experience for you, kind of having it on a page and then giving voice to it. It's like a whole different experience.
I think it's kind of, it brings the experience into another element, into another kind of dimension, which then reflects it back at me, you know, in a fuller way. That's how it feels to me at the moment. Yeah.
So what's it like for you when you have that book in your hand and you see your pieces? What is that like?
It's so funny. I really struggled. Jules and Ria and everybody will tell you that I had angst with, will tell you that I really struggled putting my stuff out there. You know, I really kind of, my critical side came out really harshly in the editing process. So I just had to, once I'd done that, I realized I just had to completely put it away. And now I read a couple of my pieces this afternoon just to kind of, get me back into the understanding of where I was at the time. And now I'm not reading them as my pieces. I'm reading them just as a piece of writing. And that kind of fascinates me because I didn't know that I could depersonalize my writing in that way. It's fascinating. I don't know what process I've been through to get to this, but I'm absolutely grateful for it, right? Because it's so much easier to read my writing in the same way as I read these other beautiful authors' writing. It's just such it's so much easier on me to look at it in a similar way. Yeah.
I love that. It's like an offering with almost like an unattachment without the, negative, editing head. That's beautiful. That's beautiful, especially coming from a point where you weren't even sure. That's like a real 180.
Yeah, this whole process has just taught me so much about what's possible. Taking some writing and then bringing it into the world as a book. It's fascinating.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Miss Scott. Hello, Anna. How are you?
I'm good. Good. Happy to be here.
So in my stalking in preparation for this, I stalked all of you online, and I was looking at your podcast, and one of the focuses of your podcast is to remind people who they truly are. And I was curious how this experience of writing from the Muses and being in this book has given you more insight into your existence.
Mm. Mm. I think it's a great question. It's like not a thought who I am. I think that's the thing, is I have to not know who I am to discover who I am. It's like a paradox, because I'm not something I put into a box. There's this, I think the writing and the Muses begin to stretch you as a human being and how you experience yourself. I guess for myself, how I experienced myself. I mean, some of the stuff I wrote, I'm like, wow, I didn't know it was coming through that way. Yeah.
That's amazing. And it sounds like, in a way, the Muses offered this new lens in a way that you hadn't experienced before.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that I loved what Vanessa said, how they're different. And what everybody has said has been so eloquent, and I think the Muse energy allows us, like we're not a box, but more of this diamond shape, this hexagon of energy. It allows all of our corners and to expand out. It's how we experience ourselves when we really play there. It'll shine different each time we go there. I go there. It shines different each time I went there.
I love that. It's like a prism almost. Like I'm thinking of like a prism.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like all the different angles. Because it's true, we do put ourselves in a lot of ways in boxes of roles and everything.
God, it's a great image. I hadn't seen that till right now. And that's really the difference. Is I think I put myself in a box, and what Muses did was showed me I'm not a box, but I'm this prism of light with these, as we all are. I mean, it's just not me, but.
And I love this concept too of changing over time too, in terms of what's there for you now. Is it, What were the biggest surprises for you as you approached each muse?
I think I think like one of them when I wrote Mother, I don't know who that person is. I still don't. Whoever said I'm going to take an arrow and learn how to pull them out softly or mindfully so I don't break it. Like, I don't know who that woman is, but it was in me. But it was the same woman who could talk to her roses and weep and share tender moments about loss. I'm like, how do you make sense of those two experiences? And then the person who wanted to stuff the balls of her, stuff her penis in her lover's mouth. I mean, like those came from this thing. I think we're so much more than we can even imagine.
Mm.
And I think that when we go to the corners, it's like that's what can erupt with the muses. They can allow us to play and start to explore those parts of us that we didn't.
I love that. I feel like that really shows like those examples of like those extreme examples that you experienced. It really seems directly correlated to mining for those muse energies. Like that was the catalyst to discovering that that's so powerful.
Yeah. It is. I think I'm more powerful. We're all more powerful than we realize.
Mm.
Muse energy is kind of the bus you get on to go experience that.
And like taking you to destinations you didn't even know of on top of it.
Yeah, that I would have been afraid to go, or like society didn't want me to go there, or whatever the reason. I didn't want to go on that tour. It wasn't allowed, or but gosh, it's fun to discover who we really are through this, to see more of who we are.
So, you talked about, you gave us a couple snippets of what all these different muse energies were and what came out. And there were some pretty big differences, right? What was it like sharing that stuff in class when you were doing muses and reading your pieces? What kind of experience was that for you?
Oh, I mean, God, I'd get caught up in my head, and I'm a human being. The thing that I love that Jules says is, when something's good. There are a couple that I knew. I think the ones that I read, I think that's what I knew, is I knew it wasn't even me, because it wasn't me coming through. Like something, they were so different. Like I just was the vehicle for it. That's what's interesting. The pieces that are in the books are the ones that I read, because I knew there was some, like you get a taste, you begin to get a flavor for oh, this is different. There's something in this one. There's some meat on this bone, or like I think that's the muse energies. You begin to know the truth of something. And so I think the muse begin when you feel like, when you read, like through the week. I don't know if anybody else feels this. This is what I'm curious about. When you read, like you have to choose which one. And then something strikes you and you're like, oh yeah, this is the one. And not for the accolades, but there's some kind of heart connection or something that you go, yeah, this is the one. And I loved what Al said. It's like, and Lucy, all of us, it's that I get to share the truth of me for a moment, even in my process. And some of the times when I'd read and it'd be like, how people like love comments. I'm like, okay, well, that one didn't fly, but I loved it. And that's what matters. Is I loved it. I'd love the accolades, but when I wrote something, I loved it and it touched me when I wrote it. And I discovered, I think that's the thing about the muses, and God, wait till you do the Wild, Dark, and Passion book. I discovered things about myself. Whether anybody else loved it or not, I got something that touched me and changed me. And that's what, if I really see, that's more important than people liking it, which is really rare for me to say. Because boy, I want people to like my work, and it doesn't usually go that way, but oh well. But I got changed.
That's so beautiful, Anna. And it just kind of reminds me of a theme of just letting ego get out of the way. You know, just letting ego get out of the way and sticking with the process. And if you're at the point where you literally are, and similar a little bit to Val about being unattached, like I'm unattached to this feedback. You know, I've discovered something about myself, about my experience as a human, about my writing. It doesn't matter. And that to me is like the ultimate getting ego out of the way. So I love that.
It matters, but not so much that I won't slip my wrist. Let's not go.
Okay. Well, hey.
But I mean, I'm kidding. Like
Yeah,
it's about 10%. Yeah, but 90%.
Right. It's dialed down, certainly.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that experience. And I think that must be such a beautiful experience to have as an artist.
I think that that's the beauty of this writing is that I go explore and I learn something about myself. It impacts me and I see more that I didn't know existed. Yeah.
I love it. Thank you.
So thank you. Thank you.
Jules.
Jamie.
It wasn't really hard for me to stalk you. But you know, I'd love to hear, as the teacher who's kind of, you know, brought this experience to all of your students, you know, inspired the book. What's it like to see your students put their work out into the world?
It's lovely, you know, don't get me wrong, it's lovely, but it's just an addition to them putting themselves on the page, right? And that's kind of what, for me, the joy is about teaching this program. How can we, as writers, uncover ourselves more as humans? And that's sort of the journey that happens. And I think that's why people keep coming back. I think the program's remarkable. I think, you know, Jack was definitely working with creative genius when he put the program together. And I think I'm a good teacher of the program. You know, I think that's accurate. Different teacher to Jack. I'm definitely holding for a more of an intimate experience in the classes, and I think Vanessa, who studied with Jack, experience. That's why Vanessa's worked with me, because she has enjoyed the smaller classes, more intimacy, and in doing that, there's more of an opportunity to be in this cohort with people who you don't know from all around the world, but you all feel such closeness with. So people putting their work into the world is brilliant. You know, I'm a big advocate for that, but people doing the exercises, coming to class, working their process, because remember, writing is a solo sport. You're doing it on your own. You know, Anna's doing it on her own in that lovely bedroom. You know, she's working a process. She's finding herself on the page, uncovering more things about her. We're such beautifully complex humans. I am fascinated with humans. I just, you know, I'm fascinated with myself as a human. And I loved how Lucy spoke to that. You know, whatever we do as humans, whether it's art or ride a bike or go hiking, you know, the opportunity for us is to be there. And I don't think often we're actually there as humans. The beautiful thing about writing is to do these exercises, you have to be there. And you learn in the first level how to get there, how to be there on the page. Because, you know, we talked people have mentioned ego, and ego lives in the intellect. It wants to write about what it knows. It wants to be good in class. It wants, you know, if nothing else, it wants, if it can't, this was my journey, if I can't do well as a writer, I'm going to shock people with the content of my life, which I could always guarantee would, you know, be like, oh my God, you know, how is she okay? But I was still relying on my intellect and my ego to do that. Whereas, you know, to really sit with the exercises as an opportunity to experience and uncover ourselves in a way that we haven't before. And that can be exciting for some and nerve-wracking for others. And I think there's only 4 people who've ever dropped out of my program, and 3 of them were psychologists. And I think that's quite funny because, you know, they love helping other people uncover themselves. But in the first level, when you're really invited to put yourself on the page, not therapeutically, like write about the most traumatic thing that happened to you as a child. I mean, God forbid, I would never do that to my students. I want whatever they write about to come because they're doing an exercise and to surprise them and to sort of, and then they go like, oh my gosh, look, there I am on the page. And I kind of love that person on the page, you know, and not a lot of people walk around the world absolutely in love with themselves. And so if they can love themselves a little bit on the page, that starts to change how they live, how they relation with their world. And there is something just remarkable. It's so humbling for me to have, you know, this job, because I'm moved. Like every class I moved, every time someone stretches themselves a little bit more, I'm moved. Every time an entry-level student suddenly sees themselves in a new way on the page, I'm moved. Every time someone stretches into new landscapes, like Al did after his dad passed, and before his dad was passing, he was working, you know, around that material because that was what was present for him in his life, not because he said, I'm going to write about my dad dying, it'll make for a good piece, but he just got present, and when he was present, that's where he was. And there are a couple of pieces Al read in class, and there was just nothing we could say after he'd shared. We were all just like so moved, not moved because, you know, of his story, but moved by the content of moved by the writing about the content of his story. The writing was remarkable. And so you should sorry, go on.
No, finish.
I was going to say, you should be able to write remarkably about anything, whether it's what you saw on your walk this morning with your dog, or the fact that a parent or someone you love has just died. Can you write remarkably about both those things? So regardless of the nature of and the juice of the human story element, the writing can capture a depth that will be compelling to a reader, regardless of the content of the story.
So, and I love what you're saying about, you know, being present with the process, focusing on the process, not the product, trying to get ego out of the way and just be present on the page. As someone who has been a student of Jack's, a teacher and writer for oodles of years, is it something you ever struggle with?
Let me be clear about what your question is. Do I struggle with what?
Do you struggle with, do you ever struggle with quieting the noise of ego and approaching the page?
No, actually, for me, I don't. I won't write now if there's a lot of ego. I'll always write if there's a lot of feeling. Writing is the first place I go because I think there's a beauty to capture the emotionality of life. But I think if I had a deadline, I'd have to bring a little bit more ego to the table. But other than that, no, because if I'm writing from ego, I'm insecure. If I'm insecure, my writing and me as a human is going to be tight, and she's going to rely on what she knows as opposed, you know, she wants to be good, and my writing is going to suck if that happens. I'd rather just do, you know, journal entry and do stream of consciousness writing than write from that place.
So you know what's needed in terms of producing a product.
Yeah, which is, and I know what's needed, and what's needed is me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not what I know. It's not my intellect, which is just like this computer that only knows what it knows. And I want to write what I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
What I don't know already. I want that on the page. And, you know, and this comes back to the Muses, because when students do the Muse exercise, as unfamiliar often as they are, there's a glimmer of familiarity in these Muse energies, because it's part of the person. And so there's all these, these amazing complexities about us and about the content, these beautiful, rich stories that we have from our past, which, you know, so many people are walking around quite frightened about, oh, don't let me look into the past. It was so traumatic. And I just think, my God, it's so juicy. Let me use as much of it as I can. How blessed am I to have so much juice in my history to pilgrim myself through onto the page. Not because I sat down and thought, hey, my dad was a drunk, let me write about that this morning, but because it shows up. My history shows up. Not because it's trying to have me process it therapeutically and resolve myself, but because my writing is so there, it's saying, okay, now let's write about this. So it's like what I say in class sometimes about the difference between walking around the world like I used to, being used by my past, right? So every time we react to somebody, we're being used by our past and our conditioning. And now, unless I'm being triggered by someone, which still happens, you know, I'm human, it's happened this morning. But now, I lost my train of thought now when I was just sharing that. Hang on, it'll come back. Oh yeah, so now when I'm walking around the world, I am consciously wanting to use my experiences. And I've said this often, there's only one thing I haven't written about. Everything else I've written. And that one thing, I just have a lot of shame about it. I'm not sure it'll find its way onto the page. It might do at some point. Everything else in my life I've written about.
I love your generosity in not only your writing, but in your sharing.
Thank you, Jamie.
So we have some questions. So I'm going to just put them out there and see who the takers are. From Mish. Some people seem nervous before starting the Muses. Were you hesitant or excited before you started?
Let me just jump in and say that's because Mish is about to start the Muses.
I'll jump in. I was excited. There's some exercise, Jules knows this very well, I am not excited about, and I will complain. But Muses is not one of them, because Muses is, sometimes you get the creativity out of the constraint of the exercise, and sometimes you get the creativity out of the expansiveness of the exercise. So Muses is a more expansive exercise. Like short poems is all about constraint, getting shorter and shorter and shorter. Or for me, music, it's like it was like totally constraining to me, in a negative way. So I was not excited about it. But Muses, it's kind of it opens doors. I just loved what Anna was saying about that. It's not a box. I'm not in a box. I'm a prism of light. It allows you to find those dimensions that maybe you haven't seen before. So don't be scared.
Yes, Jules.
It's funny to raise my hand and not be the one.
I know.
For
I think it's funny.
Actually, I think Mish is doing third level next time, right? Yeah, and then it's Muses in January. I want to just point out that a lot of people look forward to Muses and often then are the ones that struggle. because they have a preconceived idea about what it's going to be like to do the Muse exercise. And I will say that, having been in class with Vanessa for quite some time, when she did music and she did grumble every single week, everybody in class said it was some of the best things she'd ever written, the best stuff she'd ever written. She was shaking her head like that. She couldn't believe it. So we cannot judge, whether we're liking it or not. Who cares whether you like it or not? By the time you get to the Muse level, the chances are you've seen how these exercises impact your writing. So you're willing to do it, whether it's uncomfortable or not, because you want to be a better writer.
Did anyone have a more apprehensive view on Muses before they first started? Al?
Yeah, I think I did, actually. I think that I got caught up in the concept of Muses. When it was first described, what we were going to have to do, I inadvertently got caught up in, if I'm going to write from the child, then it needs to be from the child's voice. And I did that for the first kind of 3 or 4 times when I wrote that week. And it wasn't until I got bored with myself, because I could feel that I wasn't comfortable, that what was coming out just didn't feel like it was, it had done in previous sessions. And it wasn't until I got bored with myself and just wrote something from how I felt. And suddenly this piece came out, which I didn't know where it had come from. And that broke the concept for me. And that was really useful. Breaking that concept was really useful because I kind of understood more what Jules was talking about. I don't know if that answers any questions, but it occurred to me.
I'm getting a thumbs up from Mish. So this is also for Mish, I think is a great question. Can you really feel the energy in your bodies? And did anyone need to force it? Anyone? Lucy's saying no. Do you want to take this one, Lucy? And Anna too. Both of you chime in.
Yeah, no, I didn't feel any forcing, and I definitely felt it in my body for sure. Because that was definitely one of the things when Jules first said that, I was like, what's she on about? Like, I don't know what that even means. Like, but yeah, absolutely. It maybe took a while to get into it and get used to feeling it in your body, but it definitely wasn't forced, and it was weird some of the places that I felt it in. But yeah,
and it sounds like you were a little maybe intimidated by the question, like what the heck does this even mean? But yet there was an ease to it in the end.
Yeah, definitely, because I was kind of like, let's just go with it and see what happens, and it was there. Yeah.
Anna, did you want to chime in a bit?
It's interesting. I think in the first, I was afraid of the energy in the beginning. And I remember I was an observer of the energy, because to surrender to the energy means that it's going to run through you. So it was really, there's the concept of it, kind of tasting it for a second and then absorbing it and then really feeling it and let it come through you. But the other thing that's interesting is one of the muses I felt outside of me, the virgin energy. I couldn't place it in me, but I felt it all around me, like this purity of life, which I thought was interesting. But yeah, it was really scary in the beginning for me. I'm not saying anybody else, but to own those energies, my psychology had a really hard time with it in the beginning.
And I assume over time it got a little easier, or
I got more
comfort with the unease, maybe.
Yes.
Okay.
I think that's more of it. Yeah.
Well, Misha's smiling and nodding. So, yes, Jules.
So I just want to say that I love that question, because most people are not even. I was just sitting here feeling my heart beating, and I thought to myself, most of us, we live from the chin upwards. We live in a thinking paradigm of our lives. We don't live in a in our body, right? So there's all these beautiful untapped parts. If everybody sat later and just kind of felt their body happening, it's remarkable what's going on. So, so that can be a little bit destabilizing initially, just to start looking downwards as opposed to looking up here to, to our cerebral cortex. The simple fact of coming into our body in a new way and looking for not emotional trauma. We're not looking for that. It's not Gestalt therapy. What we're looking for is a vibrational movement of energy. And it's pretty remarkable. So it's there for, if you're alive, you can do the Muse exercises.
That's great. Does anyone else have another question?
I have a question.
Oh, Karen does?
I have a question for the Muse folks. Did you feel at the end different as writers? And if so, what did you notice in your writing that was different, that other people who haven't done the Muses yet, who are on the call, might be interested to see that you had experienced from a writing perspective?
Al, you want to start then, Lucy?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. I think that for me, the Muses was one of Muses and Shorts really were the two sessions for me that really brought my writing into my body. So I think there was this yeah, I think it really drew me out of the ego. It allowed me to go into my body. It allowed me to find these aspects of myself and be surprised by them. And then that door is open for the next session. That door is then open for forever, right? And I was fascinated by that door being open, and what that gave me for the sessions to come. So I think for me it was an incredibly powerful set of classes to go through.
What Al said. No, to add a little bit to that, it's for me, and I don't think I realized it at the time, but afterwards, how much letting go I did within my writing, within my life, all of it. It's like one and the same, really. And I saw that afterwards when I read the pieces back and thought, who the hell wrote that? Like, wow. It just took me to whole, like, different, just new, complete depths, if you like, that I'd never been to before. And I would say my writing has changed so much, and I don't feel like I write the same. And I feel like through all the other levels there were definitely glimpses, and probably quite a few glimpses, of my writing changing and felt more like a writer. But that felt like, after the Muses, it was like, oh yeah, I write like a writer now. It won't change. I don't think it will. That's in now, kind of thing. Yeah.
Your teacher is smiling wide. We're at our time, but Karen did have a question. So if people are willing to stay for just another minute to hear it, that'd be great. If not, we understand. Don't forget to put your review on Amazon. And Karen, what was your question?
I didn't have a question as much as I just want to say thank you. And I'm enjoying the book so much. What comes to my mind is that it brings you to life. Every one of them is so different. Every line you want to stop and stay for a while. So I just want to say thank you to all of you. I think it's incredible. And what a great, this here is one thing that should be given to all of the people is you're teaching now. You're making these educational videos to go along with what you've been teaching us, Jules. This was incredible. I learned so much. Thank you.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love the line. I love what you said. And I think it's a great way to close. The lines make you want to stop and stay for a while. Wow. To be a writer that gets a reader to say that, that is a win. That is a win. Well, I thank you all so much for joining and spending time with us. Stories from the Muses is on Amazon. We'd love to get some reviews up there if you'd be so gracious. And we will be having 2 more of these in July. So hopefully we'll see you there. Thanks so much, everyone. Congratulations to our writers.